You are joined now by political editor of the Times, Steven Swinford, to talk us through the politics of the morning. Very good morning to you, Stephen.
Good morning.
Andy Burnham has told his Justice Secretary to find a plan to prevent the early release of PC Andrew Harper's killers. We've just heard now in the news bulletin there that he is increasingly confident, is the term being used, increasingly confident that they will find a way. Talk us through the latest on this and what perhaps has changed for the Prime Minister to now be increasingly confident.
I mean, it's a massive change in the space of 12 hours. We've gone from Downing Street saying yesterday that the preferred solution wouldn't work because you couldn't just exempt these two individuals from early release, to last night we splashed the story, Andy Burnham believes he can find a solution, he's confident, and now he's gone on the record and actually said that explicitly, publicly. It's really interesting because he is staking his personal authority on this. He is basically saying to officials, no, you're wrong, you've told me this is impossible, I want you to do it. And it's got to happen. So it is the first test we've seen of Andy Burnham and his prime ministerial authority. We don't know what the solution is yet. We don't know how he's going to prevent their release, because essentially there was an issue where if you release the two of them, you'd then have to, or block the release of two of them, you'd then have to block the release of all of those that were convicted of manslaughter, which is hundreds of people, and would put pressure on the prison system. So it was seen in government as a non-starter. Andy Burnham doesn't agree, and he is going for it. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. But this is number 10, making policy effectively in real time. I mean, this was over the course of yesterday that this emerged. Burnham has been kept updated on it for the past week while he was away on holiday. He was told about it, but they now appear to be trying to move fast because they can see the strength of public sentiment on it and that it's becoming a growing issue.
So in the statement that Andy Burnham published, he said, and I quote, he will seek to engage other political parties on plans. Do you think there is a political will there from the other parties that they will be receptive to this?
I think there's potential space for a discussion, but whether there's an agreement, because regardless, whatever happens here, there are going to be some very nasty people released from prison early. That is the net result of this. And I think one of the risks here is that in basically blocking the release of the two individuals that killed PC Andy Harper, other groups might say, or other victims might say, well, that's really unfair. My child was killed in manslaughter, let's say, or there was another manslaughter case and they are still being released early. So one person said to me there is a risk here and a concern more broadly about a hierarchy of victims. And look, Andy Burnham understands this, and he makes this clear in the statement that obviously some pretty bad people are going to be released, but the point I think he's trying to make is I am doing everything in my power to limit that and limit the numbers that are going to become public from October this year.
OK. YouGov's polling puts Labour ahead of Reform UK. Do you think this is part of the Burnham bounce, or is this the beginning of a new trend?
It's a shift in the polls, and it's certainly been other pollsters had already identified it, that Labour was kind of picking it up. What's interesting is they're not picking these voters up directly from Reform UK, they are picking this up from the Greens. So there has been a decline in the Green votes, and Labour is being bolstered by that. And that was one of the arguments that Andy Burnham always made, that he could win over the voters on the left. So we'll have to see how it plays out. It is very, one thing I have learned covering politics in my time is it is very easy to underestimate Nigel Farage and Reform UK, but they tend to kind of come back and swinging at various occasions. So we'll just have to see if it's part of a longer term trend. But certainly we've had Reform dominating in the YouGov polls for well over a year. You know, poll after poll they have led, and this is the first one we've seen where that is no longer the case.
Stephen, we were talking earlier on in the programme about Reform UK and the conversation they were having about migration policies. They had spoken about Ben Wallace, called him a traitor and a moron. Obviously, we were talking about that harsh political language. When that inflammatory language is used by members of Reform UK, does it impact them in the polling? Does it change public perception of them at all?
Not that I can see. I mean, it's worth flagging that, yes, Zia Youssef is a prominent Reform UK politician, but actually the levels of public awareness about him and a lot of other senior figures in Reform UK are very low. Reform UK is synonymous in the public's mind with one man, and that is Nigel Farage, and he doesn't tend to do attacks like this. So I'm not sure how damaging or otherwise it is on a kind of broader stage. But look, it does show that Reform wants to be very, very aggressive and robust in taking on the Tories, and I think not everyone is in agreement on that. Tim Montgomery, who is a Reform UK supporter and a broadcaster, he is really concerned about Zia Youssef's comments. He's raised that with both Nigel Farage and with Zia himself, and thinks it is beyond the pale as language. And that's one of the issues. But I guess the broader point is it also reflects just how bitter these splits on the right are now, between obviously Reform, the Tories and Restore. It's very, very ugly. You've seen very, very ugly language from all sides for some time now, and this is just the latest chapter in that. And that is one thing. If you are Andy Burnham in number 10, you will be looking at those divisions on the right and you will be hoping that they remain, because for as long as the right is divided, it increases the chances of Labour winning the next election. There's a long way to go, but that is one of the concerns that I think Reform UK would certainly have, and others on the right will have as well.
OK, Steven Swinford, political editor of The Times, I appreciate you and your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
And time for our daily briefing on the day's politics, business and sport. Politics first with The Times politics newsletter editor Stefan Boscia. Morning, Stefan.
Good morning, Stig.
You're an Australian. You don't leave the tap running when you're brushing your teeth, do you?
God, no. We're told from a very young age in school. You actually get taught it in school. And not only that, but you're told to grass on your parents if they do it. So watch out for your kids, Stig.
Really? Do you know what I wish?
You're told to tell them off.
I wish my kids were sort of eco-warriors. Because you're always told the new generation really care about them. My kids are worse than I am. They just leave rubbish everywhere. Anyway, we'll move on from that as we confront the politics of the day. I'm going to do the front page of The Times first, if I may, Stefan. The Prime Minister's told the Justice Secretary to draw up plans to prevent the killers of PC Andrew Harper from being released under the early release scheme. I feel I'm going mad, Stefan, because we've now had this conversation at least 4 times. He is the Prime Minister. He knew that these guys were going to be released. How is this being asked? How is the question being asked again?
Yeah, it's slightly panto, isn't it? Because it's sort of going back and forth. And he literally made the decision last week specifically to let them, the 2 killers of Andrew Harper's, 2 of the killers, get released early, because he was told very clearly that, by the changes he made to the early release scheme by only having exemptions for rapists and child sex offenders, he was told specifically that the 2 of Harper's killers who were going to let out, that they would be let out. And so he was okay with it then, but clearly the backlash, particularly from PC Harper's wife, who has led a bit of a campaign and said she could even get involved in a legal challenge. He's obviously been quite spooked by that, and he's now told his Justice Secretary Alex Norris to find some way anyway to stop them being released.
But why has this not been done, Stefan? Because, we're looking at the numbers. There are 900-odd people in prison for manslaughter who might then be early released. There are 17,000 people, we learnt on Times Radio yesterday, on remand, who therefore not been convicted yet. There are 2,000 odd on IPP, on the indefinite sentencing scheme, which has since been abolished. There's any number on drugs offences. There's loads of women in prison who probably don't deserve to be there. You could find 900 people, 900 prison places, in 25 seconds in this justice system. Why is this so difficult?
Well, that's the thing. I think that's where they're going to get to, and I think that he's told Norris to find any way to get people out, and so I think that they're going through all the options, and they will find 900 other people to release. I think the key is that they need to find it on specific categories. You can't just say you and you can come out, you can't, because it sounds a bit worse than what you're doing. It needs to be very clearly on the lines of either how long people are in for, their sentence length, or it needs to be on conviction. So I think that I'll go through and they'll find something, but it shouldn't take this long. You're totally right.
Another problem for him, the number of small boat crossings is down year on year. We have to make that point clear. But the picture on the front of the Times today, that mega boat, mega dinghy, 230 people, that's more than the capacity of a Boeing 737. It is 15 metres long, this boat that's managed to cross the channel. It is an extraordinary photograph. And whatever the numbers overall, which are still too high, everyone would agree, the fact that a dinghy like that could make it all the way from France to this country without being checked and stopped feels almost farcical, doesn't it?
The spin was extraordinary on this. The Home Office is saying that the fact that this is being put out onto the channel is evidence that their plan's working, and that they're disrupting the criminal gangs. I think that actually it just shows that you'll never really be able to win on those grounds, because every time you come up and find better ways to get rid of smaller boats, criminals will come forward with bigger boats, and they'll always find new ways to reinvent new ways to innovate to get their trade roaring, and that's always going to be a fact here. So I think that them coming forward and saying, "Wow, the presence of these boats is almost a good thing or a sign of their plan working," is absolutely ridiculous. And as you alluded to, it's only going to be far more dangerous for people on it because that does not look like a particularly sturdy vessel.
No, it's reported by the Times have been buckling in the middle, and you can just see that. I mean, if you haven't seen this picture, go and look at it. It's like a giant banana boat, really, and every single square inch is covered by a person, and they've got their feet in the water. YouGov polling numbers. We do this every Tuesday, Stefan. It's a slightly interesting development. With all caution about polling numbers, it's still a long way out from an election and all of that. But an interesting development today.
It is. So for the first time since Burnham has come in as Prime Minister, and the first time since, I believe, this time last year, Labor is in the front. Labor has overtaken Reform. On a lot of other polls, there has been a Burnham bounce that's been noticeable. Labor has overtaken Reform. It's taken a bit longer for YouGov. But in this week's YouGov poll for the Times and Sky News, we have Labor 24%, Reform 22%, Tories on 21%. So there is a bit of a trend now, and it's pretty clear that the Andy Burnham-led government has been able to push itself forward of reform and to have the bounce that it wanted, albeit still reasonably small at this point and maybe not quite enough to go for an early election.
And a little fraction of a story-ish, maybe, of the point 2 months ago, Stefan, where there was 5 parties all within touching distance. Now it looks like 3 parties within touching distance, the Tories, Labour and Reform, with the Lib Dem and Greens just looking like a slightly more smaller side of things.
Yeah, in theory, it should be great for Labour because you have the Tories and Reform almost split down the middle, like a almost perfectly split right-wing vote. When are you ever going to get that chance again? So if Labour can start to shivvy off a few more votes from the Lib Dems and the Greens on the left, and that, for instance, in an election, minds would be focused, that could happen. They could really, easily sort of win this, or if not easily, there is a real honest path for Byrne to win a majority if he was brave enough to go for an election.
Oh, we'll see if that happens. Stefan, great to speak to you as ever.
Take it.
That's Stefan Boscia there. You can read his newsletter every day at 9 o'clock. If you are a subscriber, go to your Times account and click newsletters.